Good morning, everyone. My name is Ross Coupland, and I'm the project lead for the Centre for Excellence programme at New College, Stamford. Today, I'm going to discuss and summarise the findings from our Action Research project. Our central question is on your screen. How do maths learners perceive the role of interactive learning software in their classroom environment? This project is a culmination of work across several sites. So from the outset, I'd like to thank Rob from City College Peterborough, Tim from the College of West Anglia, Paul from Grantham College, and Jazz from Peterborough Regional College for their collaboration and support in this project. So why this focus? After initial planning discussions, we identified a common theme around software technologies and classroom implementation. Equally, we all realised that as teachers, our college goals were similar. We really wanted to enhance the student learning experience. Another shared goal was that we wanted to experiment with blended learning approaches in a more regimented and planned manner, and we wanted to engage students in maths via alternative media. However, as I'm sure you are aware, the market is very much saturated with software claiming to provide a unique and empowering learning experience. This can be an expensive learning curve for our sector, as well as a significant time investment in terms of A, staff development, B, carrying out research into the most effective pieces of software, and possibly C, implementing into our management information systems. What this project allowed us to do was to review software, gather student feedback, and identify a roadmap for the coming months. Popping up on your screen now is just an example of the many types of software already available that are aimed at teachers, students, parents. It can be a very confusing industry to carry out initial research, and as discussed, it can be quite costly, though quite a few of these pieces of software offer free trials. Sometimes that's very much time limited or limited in terms of access. You perhaps don't get to see the whole platform, so it can be a challenge identifying which one is the most suitable for your unique cohort of learners. As part of trying to find a foundation and setting out our journey over the coming months, we did carry out some preliminary reading. It did provide a really good opportunity for the team to further identify common ground and review published reports that would support our research planning. Common themes were identified, including the emphasis that the software needs to be an active piece of software. None of us were looking for a passive experience, such as simply watching video clips. Equally, our reading around the topic implied that on the whole, students were willing to engage in new experiences in maths. Certainly being digital natives, they do tend to respond positively to new ways of learning. Indeed, as Radovic, Maric and Passy highlight in their study, effective integration can offer new ways of thinking about mathematical learning to students. Yet on the other hand, as Benning, Linsell and Ingram put forward in their study, they urge caution. Without the sufficient knowledge, skills or time, effective maths software implementation is an ideal that can be complex to attain. As you can see from our methodology, once we identified our working time frame, which was January to March 2020, our plans started to click into place. What we wanted to do as a team was we had to be confident in our utilization of the software and ensure that it was embedded into lessons effectively in order to elicit valuable responses from students. As a result, September 2019 to December 2019 was used to upskill our own understanding of the software packages available. And as you can see on your screen, various software was used throughout this project. The Moodle platform was used with self-made quizzes and assessments. MyMaths, eMaths Master and MathsWatch were also used as the main pieces of software that we were trialing. The end goal, however, remained the same. What we were looking to aim for was that we were hoping to get data that would allow us to implement key changes to our scheme of learning and future lesson planning. We eventually settled on the idea that most of our data would be gathered through student interviews. This process itself was quite difficult. The question set that's in front of you underwent a lot of revisions and quite a lot of evaluation, with a lot of support from the action research training events that took place throughout this academic year. What we were attempting to do was maximise the quality of response from our 50 randomly selected students. 10 students from each college were randomly chosen and asked to take part in these interviews. The questions, as you can see, promote an open response to students that engage well, but it also offers a scaffold for those that perhaps don't have the confidence to elicit a longer discussion. So once we finally settled on these 5 questions, we felt it was actually really straightforward in terms of engaging our students and asking these questions. The time frame did change. These interviews were carried out from January 2020 to March 2020. However, prior to the lockdown phase, we were planning to almost carry out these question sets at the start and at the end of that time frame in order to identify any evolution of thought or any progress change that took place during that time frame, because we thought that would allow for some really interesting comparisons. However, due to the lockdown and the coronavirus outbreak, this proved much more challenging, but we were successful in obtaining a data set of 50 responses. The responses were then coded individually and then shared as a college. Initially, we coded to identify any narratives that were becoming apparent, any emerging trends and patterns, before we drew overall conclusions. The results have been summarised as such. It was very interesting to note that a significant number of students do enjoy the independent element of learning online. Independence and being independent were key words that cropped up an awful lot in our interviews. Equally, the students seem to put an awful lot of value on the instant access to either having their work marked for them or the instant access to explanations and guidance, whether that be through video clips or answers that would crop up onto the screen. Equally, the majority of students enjoyed having access to both paper-based and online resources. They felt valued in lesson by being able to have a choice and make their own decisions, even though the activity was the same, both online and on paper. Equally, our predictions were confirmed that students were quick to disengage and distance themselves from interactive learning software if they had a negative experience, whether that be hardware or software related. One interesting comment that kept coming out of our interviews was that students were feeling burnt out by using an awful lot of software during their college week. They felt that they were overloaded with all the different types of software available. And one student in particular had this discussion with me, and they said, I use one file to upload my work. I log into Google Classroom to submit my assignments. I need to remember my college login details to access the intranet. And now I need to remember another password to access my work on eMaths Master. This is quite a difficult process, and they had a book where they had to note down all their passwords and login details, and a lot of students did this on their phone as well. So I found it was really interesting that the students were getting tired by having to stare at screens all the time, which also cemented the fact that a lot of them did enjoy having access to the paper-based resource as well. Another student comment which really resonated with me for 2 reasons. Firstly, it made me wonder how many students have felt like this in my lessons over my career. And it also highlighted the fact that students preferred that active process. So this student said, I don't like maths and I don't think I ever will. I get left behind a lot in lessons, which makes me nervous about asking for help. The software lets me check my learning at my pace and gives me a chance to catch up. I feel like I'm involved. My teacher is very helpful but always busy. I don't want to keep bothering them. Computer work lets me be independent, and I like that. And for me, the part that the student explained that they felt involved by being able to do some independent learning on the software, that really struck home for me, and it did make me consider how many students have left my lessons in the past with possibly a negative experience or one where they didn't feel particularly engaged. So there could be a good potential here that if we get some good engagement from the software, there's a really good place for it in our classroom and as part of our lessons. Overall, though our study was small and impacted by the lockdown in March, it was interesting to note that overall there was a largely positive response in accessing learning software in a classroom environment. Equally, it was really interesting to note that we can influence how our students engage in the work by having both aspects available, whether that be a paper-based resource or an online resource. Going back to a point I made earlier, student disengagement is very high if that software, either the hardware or software, provides a negative learning experience. We also had comments from students around they were frustrated when work was not saved appropriately, or where Wi-Fi was weak, they could not connect to the software. And also some students felt that there was a long loading time in between accessing questions or loading up video clips. As a result, they found it was much easier to go over and collect the paper-based resource because they knew that the work there would not be affected by any technological issues. What this project also allowed us to do as a college network was to provide a very strong foundation for future action research next academic year. Certainly now more than ever, as we plan for next academic year, the product quality and the software that we use is essential for high levels of student engagement and a successful blended learning process. However, throughout this process, our learning curve was that there's very much still a challenge around identifying an appropriate piece of software for your unique cohort of students. The market itself, as you saw earlier, is still large and complex, and a significant time investment is required to upskill teachers, to share and deploy with students effectively, and even integrate successfully into our management information systems. I think the main takeaway from this process is that we now have a really good awareness of the very large mixture of factors that do impact a successful implementation of learning software. But by having that awareness is a success in itself, and already as a network and as a college, we're on the path to identifying methods of successful implementation next academic year. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes our presentation today. Many thanks for watching. We shall now move on to questions, if there are any. Thank you very much.